Have you ever sacrificed everything for your child, only to feel completely invisible in the end? This is not just a dramatic family story. It's my real life. My daughter gave her father-in-law a luxury watch wrapped in a gold ribbon, a gift worth thousands. And me? Her own parent, the one who worked day and night, who gave up dreams, who stood by her side. I only got $5. That moment broke my heart and changed my life forever. This is a heartbreaking real-life story about family rejection, toxic in-law favoritism, and the painful sacrifices parents make. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next will shock you. And maybe it will change the way you see your own family. When people talk about family, they usually imagine love, respect, and appreciation. We grow up believing that parents make sacrifices, and children, in return, carry that love with them forever. For me, that belief was once unshakable. I raised my daughter with every ounce of strength I had. I worked day and night, not because life was easy, but because I wanted her to have opportunities I never had. This isn't just a family drama. It's a heartbreaking real-life story about sacrifice, rejection, and the shocking truth of how relationships can fall apart when respect is missing. From the very beginning, I lived a life that revolved around my child. Money was tight, opportunities were rare, and yet every choice I made was with her future in mind. While other parents might spend their money on themselves, I chose to pour everything into her education, her happiness, and her dreams. I remember walking home late at night from a second job, shoes worn out, pockets nearly empty, but with a smile on my face because I knew she would have what she needed for school the next day. It wasn't easy. In fact, most nights I would collapse into bed, exhausted beyond words, only to wake up before sunrise to do it all over again. There were moments when I questioned whether I could keep going, but one thought pushed me through. My daughter deserves better. Every sacrifice, every tear, every sleepless night, it all felt worth it. I believed that love and effort would one day be returned with gratitude. But as the years passed, things began to change. Slowly at first. So slowly I almost ignored it. My daughter grew up, started building her own life, and eventually married into another family. I was happy for her. After all, isn't that every parent's dream? To see their child find love, start a new chapter, and create a future of their own? Yet, I couldn't ignore a subtle shift. The calls became less frequent. The visits were shorter, and when she did come around, most of the conversation revolved around her in-laws, their needs, and their expectations. I told myself it was normal. After all, marriage brings two families together. But deep down, a quiet fear began to grow. Was I being replaced? I remembered one specific holiday. I had spent the entire day preparing her favorite dishes, the ones she loved as a child. The table was full. The house smelled warm and inviting, and I sat there waiting. She arrived late, not alone, but with her husband and his parents. And while she smiled and thanked me, I couldn't help but notice how her attention was constantly directed toward them. She laughed at their jokes, asked about their comfort, and even rushed to serve them food before anyone else. Meanwhile, I sat quietly at the edge of the table, forcing a smile while my heart whispered, "You don't matter anymore." This was just the beginning of a painful realization. My daughter's bond with her in-laws seemed unshakable, while her connection with me grew weaker. I didn't expect to compete. I didn't need grand gestures or expensive gifts. All I ever wanted was simple respect, acknowledgement, and love. But as time went on, those things felt like luxuries I could no longer afford. Looking back now, I see all the warning signs. There were small moments that should have told me something was wrong. The forgotten birthdays, the missed phone calls, the canceled plans. But I excused them every time. I told myself, she's busy. She's building her life. She still loves me, even if she doesn't always show it. I clung to that hope like a lifeline, because the alternative, that I was slowly being erased from her priorities, was too painful to accept. This story is not about envy. It's not about wanting material gifts or competing with her in-laws. This is about parental sacrifice and the heartbreaking truth of family rejection. It's about what happens when years of love and effort are answered with indifference. And it's about the moment when one parent finally realizes that respect cannot be begged for. It must be given freely or not at all. As you listen to this story, I want you to imagine yourself in my position. Think of the times you've sacrificed for someone you love. Maybe it was your child, maybe a spouse, maybe even a friend. Think of the nights you went without so they could have more. The days you worked harder than you thought possible just to see them smile. And now, imagine being rewarded for all of that with nothing more than a $5 bill. That is where my story begins, a life of sacrifice, a bond that I thought could never be broken, and a shocking moment that shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. This is my truth, and maybe, just maybe, it will make you think differently about the way you treat the people who gave everything for you. As the years passed after her wedding, I noticed something that at first felt small, almost unimportant. It was the quiet, subtle shift in how my daughter treated me compared to how she treated her in-laws. I brushed it off in the beginning, telling myself she was adjusting to marriage, learning to balance two families, and finding her place in a new household. But over time, those small moments piled up, and they became impossible to ignore. This is where the distance began, and it only grew wider with each passing day. The first sign was the phone calls. When she lived at home, she used to talk to me every night. Sometimes it was about her studies, other times just about something funny she saw online. Those conversations felt like the thread that kept us close. After she got married, the calls became shorter, then less frequent, and eventually weeks would pass without hearing from her at all. I would be the one reaching out, leaving messages, asking if she was okay. And when she did pick up, her voice often sounded rushed, distracted, as if I was nothing more than an item on her to-do list. Then came the visits. At first, she promised she would stop by every weekend. I prepared her favorite meals, waiting eagerly by the window like a parent waiting for a soldier to return home. But the weekends slipped by, and so did the promises. She was busy. There were plans with her husband's family, dinners she couldn't miss, birthdays she had to attend. My house, once filled with her laughter, became silent. The walls that had witnessed her childhood now echoed with loneliness. One memory still lingers painfully in my heart. It was my birthday. I didn't expect a big celebration, but I hoped for at least a visit or a warm call to remind me I still mattered. Instead, I spent the evening alone, scrolling through social media only to see her smiling in pictures at her father-in-law's birthday party. A luxury cake, a decorated hall, expensive gifts on the table, and not even a single text message to me until the next day. She wrote, "Sorry, Mom. I was so busy last night. Happy belated birthday." Those words cut deeper than any knife. The comparisons became clearer with every family gathering. Whenever we met, her energy seemed directed toward pleasing her in-laws. She would serve them first, laugh with them, and listen attentively to every word they said. Meanwhile, I would sit quietly, observing from the corner, reminding myself not to complain. I didn't want to seem jealous or demanding, but deep down, I couldn't help asking myself, When did I stop being her priority? It wasn't about competition. I never expected to outshine anyone. All I wanted was balance. Was it too much to hope that the daughter I raised with sweat and tears would show me the same respect she so freely gave to others? I didn't need luxury gifts, expensive celebrations, or constant praise. What I craved was acknowledgement that I still held a place in her heart. But instead of closeness, I felt rejection. And rejection doesn't always come in the form of cruel words. Sometimes it comes quietly, like when your messages go unanswered, when your presence is overlooked, or when your sacrifices are taken for granted. That was the rejection I felt. As the gap between us widened, I began to reflect on my own mistakes. Did I give too much, making it easy for her to take me for granted? Did I make her believe I would always be there, no matter how little she gave in return? Parents often shield their children from struggles, and maybe in doing so, I made her blind to how much I had endured for her sake. Still, a part of me refused to let go. I told myself, she's just busy. She'll come around. I clung to that hope, even as it slipped further away with each passing year. The truth was, the more she gave her time, love, and attention to her in-laws, the more invisible I became in her life. It was as if the parent who had raised her from nothing had suddenly faded into the background, replaced by people who had only known her for a handful of years. This growing distance wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. She stopped visiting as often, and when she did, it felt like a formality. She would stay for an hour, maybe two, always with one eye on the clock. The conversations lacked warmth. There were no inside jokes, no long heart-to-hearts, no sense of closeness. She came, she smiled, she left. And with every visit, I felt like a guest in my own child's life. There's a unique kind of pain that comes from being forgotten by the very person you love most. It's not like losing a friend or drifting apart from a distant relative. This is your child, the person you raised, the person you dreamed for, the person you loved more than yourself. When they begin to pull away, it feels like your entire purpose in life is being erased. Looking back, I realized the distance wasn't sudden. It was a gradual unraveling, like a thread slowly coming loose until the whole fabric falls apart. And I, too, blinded by hope, failed to tie that thread back together. By the time I saw the truth, it was already too late. This part of the story isn't just about me. It's about countless parents who silently endure the same heartbreak. Parents who sacrifice everything only to be sidelined once their children build new lives. It's about the unspoken grief of watching your place in someone's heart shrink, replaced by others who never walked in your shoes. And yet, even in those moments of rejection, I still held on to hope. Hope that one day, my daughter would look at me with the same respect she gave her in-laws. Hope that the sacrifices I made would finally be acknowledged. Hope that the bond we once had wasn't completely lost. Little did I know, the breaking point was still to come, the moment that would crush all remaining hope and change everything forever. The breaking point of this story happened on what should have been a day of celebration. It was a family gathering filled with relatives, friends, and laughter. I walked into the house expecting warmth, connection, maybe even a small sign that my daughter still remembered everything I had done for her. Instead, I witnessed a moment that would leave a scar on my heart forever. The room was decorated with balloons and flowers. On the main table sat a large cake, surrounded by boxes wrapped in shiny paper and elegant ribbons. I noticed right away how much effort had gone into making the evening feel special. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, waiting for the big reveal. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I was about to find out. My daughter walked in with her husband by her side, carrying a small velvet box. She had a bright smile on her face, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The crowd went silent as she stepped toward her father-in-law. She handed him the box, her voice trembling with joy as she said, "This is for you, Dad, a token of appreciation for everything you've done for us." The father-in-law opened the box slowly, and gasps filled the room. Inside was a luxury watch, shining under the lights, its golden face glimmering as though it had been crafted to make everyone jealous. It wasn't just a watch, it was a statement. The gold ribbon tied around the box symbolized wealth, respect, and honor. It said, "You are valued, you are cherished," and it was spoken loudly for everyone to hear. Applause erupted. People clapped, cheered, and congratulated him for raising such a wonderful son who had married such a generous woman. Some even said, "You must be so proud." Cameras flashed, videos were taken. It was a moment designed to shine, and it worked. But in the middle of all that noise, I sat silently. My heart sank deeper with every cheer. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My daughter, the very child I had raised alone, the one I had sacrificed for, the one I had prayed over when she was sick, was showering another man with a gift worth thousands, while I sat empty-handed. At least, that's what I thought until she turned to me. For a brief second, hope flickered inside me. Maybe she had something prepared for me too. Maybe this was her way of balancing everything out, showing respect to her in-laws, but not forgetting her own parent. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to me with a smile. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a $5 bill. Not even a card, not even a note. Just $5. The room around me blurred. My ears rang as laughter and applause for the father-in-law continued. People were too busy admiring the watch to notice me staring at that single bill, my fingers numb, my chest tight. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it wouldn't go away. My face burned with humiliation. Do you know what $5 says? It says, "You don't matter." It says, "You are an afterthought." It says, "All of your sacrifices are worth less than a cup of coffee." That moment wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about acknowledgement, about love. And in that moment, I realized I had none of those things left from her. I replayed decades of memories in my mind, nights of working double shifts to buy her school supplies, days of skipping meals so she could eat, years of putting her needs above my own. And all of that was reduced to $5. The contrast was impossible to ignore. On one side of the room, her father-in-law was celebrated with applause, expensive gifts, and admiration. On the other side, I sat invisible, holding $5 like it was a symbol of my worth. That luxury watch with a gold ribbon wasn't just a gift, it was proof of where her heart truly belonged. And it wasn't with me. For the rest of the evening, I tried to keep a neutral face. I didn't want to ruin the celebration. I forced a smile when people looked my way, but inside, I was crumbling. I kept asking myself, how did it come to this? How did the child I loved more than anything in this world turn into someone who could humiliate me so publicly? Every cheer felt like a knife. Every photo taken felt like a reminder that I didn't belong. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand an explanation. But instead, I sat in silence, clutching that $5 bill like it was the only thing holding me together. When the night ended, I walked out of that house, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. The watch and the money weren't just gifts, they were symbols. Symbols of love given freely to one side, and rejection handed coldly to the other. That was the night I understood something painful. Respect cannot be bought, but it can be withheld. And when it's withheld by the very child you sacrificed everything for, it cuts deeper than any wound you can imagine. This wasn't just a gift exchange. This was the moment my role as a parent was downgraded to nothing more than a background figure, and from that night forward, I would carry the image of that golden watch and that wrinkled $5 bill as the ultimate reminder of where I stood in her life. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning of the end. The breaking point was coming, and once it arrived, there would be no turning back. That night, as I held the wrinkled $5 bill in my hand, something inside me snapped. For years, I had endured the growing distance, the quiet rejection, the endless excuses. I told myself it was just a phase, that my daughter would one day remember the sacrifices I had made. But staring at that small bill while the crowd cheered for the luxury watch, I realized the truth. I was no longer her priority. I wasn't even on her list. The humiliation was unbearable. I looked around the room, filled with laughter, clapping, and admiration for her father-in-law. Nobody noticed me sitting quietly in the corner, my heart breaking into pieces. I wanted to disappear, but more than that, I wanted to scream, to shout, "Do you know what I gave up for her? Do you know the nights I worked until my hands bled, just so she could have a better life? Do you know the dreams I buried, the food I skipped, the tears I hid?" But no one would have listened. The truth is, they didn't care. That golden watch had already spoken louder than any words could. It declared him honored, respected, cherished. And me? My $5 bill declared me invisible. On the drive home, I replayed the entire evening in my head. Every sacrifice I made flashed before me like scenes from a movie. The time I stayed up all night sewing her costume for a school play. The times I walked miles to save money for her textbooks. The mornings I left for work before sunrise just to pay for her tuition. I gave her everything. And yet, in return, I received nothing but rejection. I felt anger rise in my chest, not just at her, but at myself. I had allowed this to happen. I had excused her behavior again and again, thinking things would improve. I had convinced myself that love was enough, that patience would eventually heal the distance between us. But patience had only turned me into a doormat. And in that moment, I realized something painful. Respect cannot be begged for. It must be given freely. By the time I got home, my decision was clear. I could no longer allow myself to be treated as less than I deserved. I had spent too many years giving everything to someone who gave me nothing in return. It was time to let go. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand. I opened our message history, years of conversations, memories, photos. My thumb hovered over her name, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Could I really do this? Could I cut ties with my own daughter? The thought was unbearable. She was my child. No matter what, a part of me still loved her more than life itself. But then, I looked at that $5 bill on my nightstand, lying there like a cruel reminder. It wasn't about the money, it was about the message, and the message was clear. You don't matter to me. With tears streaming down my face, I pressed the button. Block. Just like that, the connection was gone. It felt like ripping out a piece of my own heart. I sat there in silence, phone trembling in my hands, wondering if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But as the minutes passed, something strange happened. Amid the grief and pain, I felt a sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting by the phone, hoping for a call that would never come. I wasn't sitting by the window, praying for a visit that would never happen. I wasn't clinging to hope that only hurt me more each day. I had taken control. And though it broke me, it also freed me. The next morning, I woke up with puffy eyes and a heavy heart. The silence in the house was deafening, but it was also honest. No more false hopes. No more excuses. Just me, my memories, and the truth. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it was real. Breaking ties with my daughter was the hardest decision I've ever made. Parents are taught to endure anything for their children, to forgive endlessly, to love unconditionally. But love without respect is nothing but chains. And I refuse to live chained to rejection any longer. As days turned into weeks, I reflected on what had happened. The pain didn't disappear overnight. There were moments when I almost unblocked her, desperate for even a single word. But then I remembered the humiliation of that night. I remembered the applause for the luxury watch and the weight of that $5 bill in my hand. And I reminded myself, you deserve better. This was my breaking point. The moment when I finally chose self-respect over silent suffering. The moment when I stopped begging for love that wasn't there. The moment I let go, not because I didn't love her, but because I finally loved myself enough to walk away. And as painful as it was, I knew deep down it was the right choice. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to close the door that keeps hurting you. The night I pressed block on my phone was the night everything changed. It wasn't just about cutting off contact with my daughter. It was about walking away from years of silent suffering, from the humiliation of being overlooked, and from the painful cycle of waiting for respect that would never come. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, but don't mistake that choice for an easy one. Walking away from your own child feels like tearing apart your very soul. Parents aren't built to let go. We are programmed to endure, to forgive, to hope. Yet I realized hope had turned into chains. It kept me tied to disappointment, dragging me down every time she chose her in-laws over me. So that night, with my heart in pieces, I decided to cut the chain. The next few days felt like moving through fog. The silence in my house, once unbearable, now carried a strange sense of honesty. I no longer jumped when my phone buzzed. I no longer checked my calendar for a visit that wasn't going to happen. It hurt, yes, but the pain was pure. It wasn't mixed with false hope anymore. I started noticing little changes in myself. Mornings felt quieter, but I also felt lighter. I had spent years carrying the weight of rejection, always asking myself what I had done wrong, what I could do better to win back my daughter's love. But now, I stopped asking. I accepted the truth. Some people, even your own children, may never value you the way you deserve. And as heartbreaking as that is, it's also freeing. One evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, staring at the sunset. The sky burned orange and pink, beautiful but fleeting. It reminded me of my daughter's childhood, the years of laughter, of bedtime stories, of simple moments that seemed eternal at the time, but vanished too quickly. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not because I regretted loving her, but because I mourned the bond we once had. Walking away didn't erase those memories. It just forced me to accept that the past was gone, and the future would never look the same. Friends and relatives began to notice the distance. Some asked why my daughter didn't visit anymore. Others hinted that maybe I was being too harsh, that parents should forgive no matter what. Their words stung, but I stayed silent. How could I explain the humiliation of that $5 bill? How could I make them feel the pain of being replaced by a golden watch? Unless you've lived it, you can't understand it. And I refused to justify my choice to people who had never walked in my shoes. Walking away wasn't just about ending communication. It was about reclaiming my dignity. For years, I allowed myself to sit quietly in the corner, smiling through the pain, pretending I didn't notice her favoritism toward her in-laws. I allowed myself to accept scraps of attention, thinking love in any form was better than nothing. But that night taught me something vital. Love without respect is not love. It's humiliation. So I began building a new life, one that didn't revolve around waiting for her approval. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned years ago: gardening, reading, even simple walks in the park. At first, everything felt empty, but slowly the emptiness turned into peace. The flowers in my garden grew brighter. The books on my shelf spoke louder, and the air on my walks felt fresher. I realized I had been starving myself emotionally for years, all while feeding her with unconditional love that was never returned. Did I miss her? Every single day. Did I wish things were different? Absolutely. But walking away wasn't about erasing her from my heart. It was about saving myself from drowning in disappointment. I could still love her from afar, but I no longer needed to beg for scraps of her affection. There were nights when guilt haunted me. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I had failed as a parent. Was it my fault she didn't respect me? Did I love her too much, give too much, and teach her to take me for granted? The questions gnawed at me, but eventually I realized the truth. No amount of sacrifice can guarantee gratitude. Children make their own choices, and while parents can shape their future, they cannot force them to value what truly matters. The real turning point came one afternoon when I walked past a family in the park. A mother held her little girl's hand, smiling as the child laughed freely. For a moment, I felt a sharp pang in my chest, remembering when my daughter was that small, when her laughter filled my world with light. But instead of breaking me, that memory gave me strength. It reminded me that I had loved her well, that I had done my part. What she chose to do with that love was beyond my control. Walking away doesn't mean the love ends. It means the suffering ends. And sometimes, ending the suffering is the only way to survive. Now, when I look at my life, I see scars, yes, but I also see strength. I survived rejection from the person I loved most, and I chose self-respect over silent pain. That choice may have cost me my daughter, but it gave me back myself. And for the first time in a long time, I feel free. When I look back now, it feels like my life is divided into two chapters: before that night and after it. Before, I was a parent who lived for someone else, who measured my worth by how much love I could give and how much gratitude I hoped to receive. After, I became someone who learned to live with scars, but also with strength. A person who discovered that sometimes survival means choosing yourself, even when it breaks your heart. The first lesson I learned is this: sacrifice does not guarantee appreciation. As parents, we pour everything we have into our children: our money, our energy, our health, even our dreams. We give because it feels natural, because love pushes us to go further than we thought possible. But along the way, many of us forget that sacrifice is a choice, not a debt. Our children owe us love, not repayment. Yet even that love cannot be demanded. It has to come freely, and if it doesn't, no amount of sacrifice will create it. For years, I believed my daughter would one day look at me with gratitude in her eyes, would acknowledge the sleepless nights and empty pockets I endured for her. I built my hope around that imagined moment, and when it never came, I broke. But now I see that my mistake wasn't loving too much. It was expecting love to be returned in the same form. Love doesn't always come back the way we give it. Sometimes it doesn't come back at all. And we must find the strength to survive that truth. The second lesson is about boundaries and self-respect. Family bonds are sacred, yes, but they are not a license for abuse, neglect, or humiliation. Too many parents, especially in cultures that prize filial piety, believe they must endure whatever treatment their children give them. But enduring disrespect isn't noble, it's destructive. Respect is the foundation of any healthy relationship, even between parent and child. Without it, what remains is not love, but dependency, and dependency breeds resentment. Walking away, painful as it was, became my act of reclaiming dignity. It taught me that boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are doors that decide who is allowed to stay. Another reflection that grew stronger with time is this: healing begins with acceptance. For months after I cut ties, I tortured myself with what if questions. What if I had raised her differently? What if I had demanded more respect earlier? What if I had stayed silent and swallowed the humiliation just one more time? But healing doesn't live in the past. It lives in the present, in the quiet acceptance that things are the way they are, not the way we wish them to be. Accepting reality doesn't mean I stop loving my daughter. It means I stop bleeding from wounds she no longer cares to heal. In this painful journey, I also discovered something unexpected: forgiveness without reconciliation. I know that may sound strange. Forgiveness for many means restoring relationships, but in my case, it meant setting myself free from the poison of anger. I forgave her, not because she asked for it or deserved it, but because I didn't want bitterness to define the rest of my life. Forgiving her allowed me to release the heavy chains around my heart. Reconciliation may never happen, but forgiveness gave me peace. The lessons I learned also extend beyond my personal pain. They are reminders for anyone listening who has felt invisible in their own family. If you've ever been the one who gave everything and received nothing, I want you to hear this: your worth is not measured by how others treat you. You are valuable, even if your family fails to see it. And sometimes, the bravest act of love is turning that love inward toward yourself. Now, I spend my days differently. I cherish small joys I once overlooked: the sound of birds outside my window, the laughter of neighbors' children playing in the street, the warmth of sunlight on my skin. Life is quieter, but it's honest. I don't live in the shadow of unmet expectations anymore. Instead, I live in the light of self-respect. And while I may carry the ache of a broken bond forever, I also carry the wisdom it gave me. The biggest lesson of all? Love with all your heart, but never lose yourself in the process. Parents are not bottomless wells. We are human, and we deserve love, respect, and dignity just as much as anyone else. When those things are denied, it's not selfish to walk away, it's survival. And survival, I've learned, is a kind of courage too. As I reflect now, I realize my story is not just about me and my daughter. It's about every parent who has ever felt unseen, every soul who has ever been replaced, every heart that has ever broken in silence. It's about finding the courage to choose peace over pain, dignity over humiliation, and self-love over endless sacrifice. So if you're listening to my story and you see yourself in it, take this lesson with you. You are not alone. Your pain is real, your sacrifices mattered, and your dignity is worth protecting. Sometimes walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means finally standing up. Moving forward was not a single moment. It was a long, uneven road filled with both setbacks and small victories. After years of building my life around someone else's choices, I had to learn how to rebuild a life of my own. At first, the silence was unbearable. My phone no longer rang with her voice, no unexpected visits to brighten the day. But in that silence, I found space. Space to breathe, to think, to heal. The first step forward was learning to redefine myself outside the role of parent. For decades, I had lived only as someone's mother, someone's provider, someone's caretaker. I forgot what it meant to be simply myself. Moving forward meant discovering the person I had lost along the way. I revisited old dreams, ones I had pushed aside for years. I began painting again, even if my hands shook with rustiness. I joined a local reading group, where strangers became companions in stories. Slowly, I realized there was still life left for me, life beyond the heartbreak. Another part of moving forward was building new connections. Pain often isolates us, convincing us that no one else could possibly understand. But as I began to share my story in quiet conversations, I realized how many others carried the same hidden wounds. Parents, siblings, even lifelong friends, all had experienced betrayal or rejection from those they loved most. In opening my heart, I found community, and in community, I found strength. No longer was I a solitary figure abandoned by love. I was part of a larger human story, one of resilience and healing. One powerful shift came when I started volunteering. Giving my time to others reminded me that love is still abundant in this world. It just might not always come from where you expect it. I spent afternoons teaching children how to read, evenings helping at local shelters, and weekends gardening in shared spaces. Each small act of giving filled the hollow places my daughter's rejection had left behind. I no longer gave to her alone. I gave to the world, and the world gave back in kindness. But perhaps the most profound step in moving forward was learning to carry love without bitterness. Many people asked me, "Do you still love your daughter?" And my answer is always yes. Love does not vanish because of pain. It transforms. It softens into memory, into quiet prayers for her happiness, even from a distance. I no longer wait for her calls, nor do I dream of her sudden return. Instead, I love her silently, without expectation. That, I realized, is the purest form of love, one that does not demand, only wishes well. Still, moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. I carry the lessons of the past like a lantern, guiding me through future paths. I've learned to honor my sacrifices without resenting the lack of recognition. I've learned that respect is non-negotiable, that boundaries are acts of love for both myself and others. Most importantly, I've learned that moving forward is not about erasing the pain. It's about building a life big enough to hold both pain and joy together. As time passed, I began to notice how much lighter I felt. The weight of waiting, the constant ache of disappointment, had lifted. I laughed more easily, even at small things. The world seemed brighter, not because the hurt was gone, but because I had chosen not to let it control me anymore. My scars became part of my story, but they no longer defined me. Now, when I sit by the window watching the sunset, I feel peace. I think of the past not with anger, but with gratitude for the lessons, for the strength I never knew I had, for the resilience born from heartbreak. Moving forward has taught me that sometimes life's greatest tragedies are also its greatest teachers. And so, this is where my story ends. Not in despair, but in renewal. I am no longer the parent waiting for scraps of attention. I am a whole person, living a whole life with dignity and self-respect. My daughter's choices shape my past, but they do not define my future. I move forward carrying love, carrying lessons, and carrying hope, not for reconciliation, but for peace within myself. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt abandoned, overlooked, or invisible in your own family, I want you to know, moving forward is possible. Your life is not over because someone failed to value you. You can still build joy, still create love, still find meaning beyond the pain. Moving forward doesn't erase the past. It gives you the power to write a new chapter. So here I am, scars and all, still standing, still breathing, still loving. My story may have begun with heartbreak, but it ends with strength. And if my journey teaches anything, let it be this. Even in the face of rejection, there is always a way forward.